What if the sun never set? Imagine waking up in the 21st century, but the world map looks nothing like it does now. India still flies the Union Jack. Africa's borders have been redrawn by British penstrokes. Canada isn't just an ally, it's the Western command of an empire that never died. And every child in Lagos, Delhi, Sydney, and Kingston pledges allegiance to a crown seated in London. But this isn't just a fantasy. It almost happened. The British Empire once ruled over 400 million people across every inhabited continent. At its height, it controlled a quarter of the Earth's landmass. Railroads in East Africa, parliament buildings in New Zealand, tea plantations in Assam, red-coated soldiers standing guard from the Suez Canal to Singapore. This wasn't just a nation, it was a system. A living, breathing organism held together by trade, guns, and myth. And then, it collapsed. But what if it didn't? What if Britain adapted, evolved, and tightened its grip instead of letting go? What if the wave of independence movements had been crushed, or never even started? What if Gandhi's Salt March was just a forgotten footnote, and America's closest ally was still its ruler? This is not just a what if about flags and borders. This is a story about culture, technology, war, resistance, and control. Because the fall of the British Empire shaped everything we know, the Cold War, the rise of the US, the chaos in the Middle East, the Global South's hunger for independence. So if it never fell, everything changes. The year is 1945. World War II is over. Britain is battered but not broken. Historically, this is where the empire began to unravel. India demanded independence. African colonies stirred. The US pressured Britain to decolonize. The myth of imperial invincibility cracked. But let's twist the timeline. Let's say Churchill doesn't lose the 1945 election. Let's say Labour never rises. Instead of retreat, there's resolve. Britain pours its remaining strength into preserving the empire, not for glory, but for survival. A post-war strategy of federation, integration, and suppression. The Commonwealth isn't a symbolic club. It becomes a superstate. Technocrats in London create a new vision, the United Empire. A rebranded system where colonies are no longer ruled, they're partners. Parliament seats are granted to elites in Nairobi, Calcutta, and Melbourne. Propaganda spins tales of unity, progress, and shared destiny. But underneath? Surveillance, control, economic dependency masked as development aid. India becomes the crown jewel again, but with wires. British intelligence infiltrates resistance networks. Gandhi is imprisoned earlier. Nehru is co-opted into a coalition government. The Quit India movement? Quashed with brutal efficiency. British troops are kept longer, equipped better, trained for counterinsurgency. Any flicker of rebellion is snuffed out with surgical precision. And in Africa? Instead of chaotic withdrawal, Britain builds roads, schools, universities, all under the banner of benevolent empire. But this isn't generosity. It's strategy. Educated elites are groomed, given scholarships, flown to Oxford, and returned as administrators loyal to London. Integration becomes the imperial buzzword. By the 1960s, while the real world was decolonizing, this alternate empire is modernizing. The Suez Crisis never triggers humiliation, because Egypt never fully escapes Britain's grasp. Nasser is overthrown in a coup supported by MI6. The canal remains British. Oil flows uninterrupted. The US watches uneasily. It's no longer the sole superpower of the West. Instead, it shares the stage with a united empire, rich, vast, and technologically ambitious. Because here's where the timeline bends again. By maintaining its empire, Britain doesn't stagnate, it accelerates. Resources from across the globe flow into a centralized system of innovation. Silicon Valley never becomes the beating heart of tech. Instead, it's Empire Valley, stretching from Cambridge to Nairobi. Engineers from Lagos, chemists from Karachi, coders from Brisbane, all working under imperial funding, connected by fiber optics before the rest of the world catches up. British Airways doesn't just fly to Hong Kong. It owns it, forever. But cracks still form. Empires aren't just held by force. They're held by belief. And belief is fragile. By the 1970s, the United Empire faces its reckoning. Cultural pressure mounts. Music, film, and protest movements erupt across the globe. Jamaican youth blast reggae anthems about freedom. Indian poets question loyalty. South African students burn British flags. The empire tries to contain it with soft power, broadcasting imperial unity through BBC channels in every language, flooding markets with British-made smartphones, sponsoring mega sporting events. But beneath the glitter, resentment grows. One wrong move, one scandal, one uprising too brutal, captured on a smuggled camera and broadcast to the world, and the facade crumbles. What keeps it alive? A new weapon, not nuclear, not conventional, but digital. Facial recognition in Lagos, AI-powered censorship in Delhi, drones patrolling Kenyan skies, all British-made, all defended as security measures, all part of a strategy to monitor, not empower. By 1984, Big Brother isn't fiction. He's wearing a monocle. And now, the world isn't multipolar. It's binary. The United States stands for liberal democracy, at least in theory. The United Empire offers order, efficiency, a single currency, one passport, peace, at a price. And countries caught in the middle must choose, rebel or join. Would it work? Would the benefits outweigh the control? Would stability and growth justify the surveillance? Could people trade their freedom for comfort, and call it progress? What happens when you're born into an empire so vast, so seamless, that you don't even see its edges? And what would happen to identity? Would people in Ghana still feel Ghanaian? Would Australians still look west? Would Indians still dream of independence, or just dream of rising in the imperial ranks? Is an empire still an empire, if everyone stops calling it one? Fast forward to the 1990s. In our real world, the Cold War ends. The Soviet Union collapses. The US becomes the uncontested global leader. But in this alternate world, the Cold War looks very different. The United Empire never retreats. It expands. When Eastern Europe breaks away from Moscow, Britain doesn't just cheer from afar, it intervenes. With resources from 5 continents, it launches Operation Stability. Troops, aid, advisors, sent to Poland, to Romania, even to the Baltics. Not as occupiers, as protectors. That's the narrative. Western Europe fractures. France grows uneasy. Germany grows resentful. The EU? Never born. Instead, the continent is split between the American alliance and the empire. And in this new order, America doesn't lead the world, it competes with it. The internet isn't a free frontier, it's imperial property. British corporations dominate early infrastructure. Empire Net, not Google, becomes the dominant search engine. A firewall, a polite one, wrapped in royal branding, filters content across the colonies. All for cultural harmony. And the British flag? It evolves. The Union Jack becomes a global logo, stitched into uniforms, burned into textbooks, painted across satellites in orbit. Children are taught not just history, but the empire's version of it. A seamless blend of pride, duty, and silence. The wars we knew, Afghanistan, Iraq, they still happen, but differently. When 9/11 hits, it's not just America that responds. The empire does too. A joint task force, led by British generals, with Indian, Kenyan, and Australian regiments, storms into the Middle East. But this time, there's no room for improvisation. The empire has learned from history. It crushes opposition with overwhelming force, and then builds infrastructure faster than rebels can regroup. But the peace it brings? It's artificial. Every town has a CCTV tower. Every family has an ID chip. Every book, every song, every joke, scanned, rated, approved. Even thoughts begin to change. Self-censorship becomes instinct. Resistance becomes rare. And when it rises, it's subtle. Art, code, underground comedy in Lagos, banned poetry in Calcutta, pirate radio in Johannesburg. The empire calls this cultural deviance. Others call it hope. And still, it continues. By the 2010s, the United Empire has colonized the future. Mars missions carry the imperial crest. Imperial biotech firms patent gene therapies grown from plants in the Congo. Education across the world is standardized, in empire curriculum, taught in schools from Auckland to Accra. The empire speaks in one tongue, Imperial English. Accents are flattened, dialects erased. Cultural identities become museum pieces, safe, commodified, approved for display but stripped of power. But the empire is not invincible. No system is. The cracks appear again. A cyber leak. An insider from within the Imperial Data Ministry publishes terabytes of secret files, proof of mass manipulation, surveillance experiments, mind-tracking software. And suddenly, the empire's perfect image is shattered. Riots in London, uprisings in Mumbai, mass walkouts in Nigeria, students in Vancouver hack imperial systems live on air. The illusion dissolves, the myth breaks, and now, the empire stands at a crossroads. Double down, or fall apart. The crown moves fast. Emergency laws are passed. Dissidents disappear. New AI systems replace local police. Satellites scan for subversive behavior. But something's different this time. The fear isn't working. Too many have seen the truth. And now, the idea of freedom spreads like fire. But here's the twist. It doesn't lead to chaos. It leads to negotiation. Because some don't want the empire to vanish, they want to remake it. From within, young leaders rise across the empire. Not British, not aristocrats, but Africans, Asians, islanders. They demand real power, real representation, a chance to turn the empire into something new, not a relic, but a shared future. A constitution is proposed, the monarchy is dissolved, parliament is restructured into a global assembly. The empire becomes something it never was, consensual. But it comes at a cost. The British identity fades. The culture that built the empire dissolves into the mix. Some celebrate, others mourn. London becomes a capital among many, not above. And power, once hoarded, is redistributed. The empire survives, but it is no longer British. It is something else. And now we ask, was it worth it? The centuries of control, the suppression of rebellion, the quiet erasure of difference, the long, slow evolution into something that barely resembles its origin. Was this future better than collapse? Would a world under empire be safer, or just quieter? Would we feel more connected, or more watched? Would we still dream of independence, or forget we ever needed it? Sometimes, survival changes you more than death. But what if it never reached that point? What if the empire never evolved? What if, instead of transforming, it calcified, stuck in its old rhythms, too proud to change, too scared to let go? There's a darker path. Imagine the 21st century ruled not by a global federation, but by a dying imperial machine. Still enormous, still powerful, but rigid. Obsessed with hierarchy. Paranoid. Fragile. In this version, the British Empire becomes an empire of shadows. It no longer inspires. It intimidates. Surveillance doesn't just monitor the public, it monitors the elite. Loyalty tests are conducted in schools. Family histories are audited for signs of radical lineage. Whispers of rebellion are met with quiet disappearances. And London? It's no longer a beacon. It's a fortress. A walled city surrounded by security zones, accessible only by imperial clearance. Inside, the elite live in luxury, artificial skies, cloned servants, synthetic food grown from empire-only seeds. Outside, the periphery decays. India becomes the production hub. Africa becomes the power plant. The Caribbean becomes the playground of the imperial elite. And if any region dares to rebel, it is choked off, digitally, economically, militarily. The world is no longer united by culture or vision. It is held together by code. Algorithms predict unrest before it begins. Drones respond to facial expressions. Speech patterns are monitored for signs of insubordination. The empire doesn't need to kill anymore. It simply isolates, silences, redirects. You disappear from the system long before anyone notices you're gone. And still, the propaganda flows. Prosperity through unity, peace through loyalty. History is safe in imperial hands. But no one believes it. Not even the ones who say it. This is a world where rebellion is impossible, but dissatisfaction is universal. A quiet, exhausted world. No bombs, no protests, just the silence of submission. And still, the sun never sets. But what does it shine on? It shines on a society that forgot how to imagine. Children are taught formulas, not questions. Adults are taught obedience, not thought. Art is algorithmic. Culture is curated. Joy becomes a controlled substance, dosed through screens and subscriptions. And in this silence, something breaks. A glitch. A moment. Maybe it's a song. Unfiltered, raw, smuggled through a forgotten channel. Maybe it's a face, broadcast live, screaming truth into a feed that can't be stopped fast enough. Maybe it's a choice, small, private, insignificant on its own. But when 1 billion people make it at once, empires fall. Because no system, no matter how powerful, can survive forever without belief. And belief is fragile. In this alternate world, the fall of the British Empire doesn't come through war. It comes through apathy, through silence, through the slow, unstoppable erosion of meaning. The empire remains, but it becomes irrelevant. People still use imperial ids. They still live under imperial laws. But in their hearts, they've already left. They stop believing. They stop caring. They stop watching the Queen's address. They stop voting in mock parliaments. They stop pretending. And eventually, the empire isn't defeated. It's forgotten. Its buildings stand, its networks hum, its logos remain painted on walls. But no one looks. And when the last imperial administrator logs off his terminal for the final time, no one notices. A whisper, a fade, not with a bang, but with a shrug. And now, back to our world. The British Empire did fall. Not in a single day. Not even in a single century. But it fell. And because of that, the world we know was born. A world of new nations. New voices. New ideas. A world where identity is contested, debated, remade. A world that is messy, yes, but alive. A world where no one power can speak for all. But still, we wonder. What if it hadn't? Let's go back. Not to the future, but to the beginning. To a time when Britain was not yet an empire, just a small island on the edge of Europe. Surrounded by larger rivals. Spain, France, the Ottomans. Powers that laughed at Britain's ambitions. But it grew. It clawed its way across oceans with ships, steel, and sugar. It built an empire not just through might, but through myth. The myth of superiority, of civilization, of divine right, and that myth worked. It convinced a nation of merchants and monarchs that they were destined to rule. It convinced millions of colonized people that their histories were irrelevant, that their traditions were savage, that their futures lay in imitation. But myths come with a cost. Generations lived and died under banners they never chose. Languages faded. Borders bled. Resistance was branded as treason. Entire cultures bent, or broke, under the weight of imperial ambition. So if that empire had never fallen, then perhaps those myths would have become facts. Children in Zimbabwe might speak only the Queen's English. The temples of India might have been repurposed into shopping malls with imperial logos. The great universities of Africa might only teach Western philosophy, because their own had been erased. And millions of people might never know that another way was possible. Because here's the terrifying truth. If the empire never falls, eventually no one remembers it exists. It becomes the air we breathe, the ground we walk on, unseen, unquestioned, and the greatest trick empire ever plays, is making itself invisible. But not everyone forgets. In this alternate world, the stories of resistance survive underground, whispered in kitchen corners, sung on radio static, etched into walls when no one's watching. Not as rebellion, but as memory. As proof that once, someone dared to say no. And maybe that's enough. Because all it takes is one remembered story, to light the match. But here's the question we can't avoid. Would you want to live in that world? A world where trains run on time, cities are clean, and power is centralized. But freedom is rationed like medicine. Where you never fear violence, but you never feel true joy. Where the price of peace is obedience. Or would you choose chaos? Would you choose the noise, the arguments, the failures, the revolutions, the pain of being free? Because that's what the fall of empire gave us. Not perfection, not harmony, but the right to try, to fight, to fail, to become. Empires offer certainty. Freedom offers risk. But risk is how we grow. It's how we learn. It's how we create. It's how we remember that we are not the property of kings or algorithms or flags. We are the authors of our own stories. And so when we ask, what if the British Empire never fell? We're really asking something deeper. We're asking if order is worth more than dignity. If comfort is worth more than voice. If history is worth repeating. But let's take one last look. Because even in our real world, where the British Empire did fall, its echoes remain. Its railways still cut through Indian soil. Its legal codes still govern courts across Africa. Its language shapes global trade, science, entertainment, diplomacy. Its influence lingers in invisible ways. In how we draw maps, how we teach history, how we define power. And some ask, did it ever truly end? Or did it just change form? Because empires don't always die. Sometimes, they evolve into corporations, into currencies, into systems of thought so deeply embedded, we don't question them anymore. Globalization, capitalism, Western values. They wear different clothes, speak different tongues, but the DNA is familiar. And the empire, in some ways, is still here. Not with red coats or musket lines, but with stock indices and Wi-Fi cables. It doesn't conquer. It absorbs. It doesn't command. It suggests. It doesn't silence. It drowns. So maybe the real question isn't, what if the British Empire never fell? Maybe it's, did we ever truly leave it behind? And if not, what does that say about us? Because in the end, history is not a list of events. It's a mirror. And when we look at the empire, its rise, its cruelty, its splendor, its fall, we're not just looking at the past. We're looking at ourselves, at what we want, at what we're willing to trade, at what we might do again, if given the chance. So next time you walk through a city square, speak English to a stranger, scroll through news written in Western cadence, ask yourself, are we free? Or are we just free, within someone else's system? And if the empire never fell, if it still lived, masked by time and comfort, would we even notice? Or would we, one day, wake up, and realize we were born in it? Not by invasion, not by force, but by forgetting the world could be different. And maybe, just maybe, that's how empires win. If this made you think, even for a moment, don't forget to subscribe. We have more untold stories waiting.